Alright, one more video today, trying to iron out the last details of this video capture stuff, and hopefully this tweak works better. We'll see. In any case, this is not really a very exciting deck tech. It's again, I'm just trying to test my settings before I start doing like draft videos coming up in about a week. So if you're subscribed, one of like the two people who subscribe to this channel at this point, I'm not even gonna push this to subscribers because this is just a test video, just like the other deck tech type stuff, just me trying to test the video settings. In any case, enough rambling. This video can be really short. This is Delver. This is probably one of the best decks in the format. I love Pauper, but I still kind of, I don't know, I play a lot more standard and modern, and I'm a little bit unwilling, I guess, to spend, you know, a bunch of money on dazes, a bunch of money on snaps, which are kind of, I believe in the, sort of the optimal build of Delver. You're going to have a couple dazes in here just to catch your opponent sometimes. I think this deck is still very competitive, though. I mean, even if this is just a slightly suboptimal build of the best deck in Pauper, it's still one of the best decks in Pauper. So when I go to a league, this is one of the things I'm probably bringing out. As long as people are still running enough hate for Affinity in the sideboards, then I'm going to be running this as opposed to Affinity. But in any case, a few little tech things, little tech choices. For people who haven't seen Delver, I can kind of explain some of the stuff going on. The core of the deck, of course, is you have Delver of Secrets, you have Spellstutter Sprite, you have Ninja of the Deep Hours, you have Fairy Miscreant. These are all run as a 4 of. And they form a lot of the basis for what you're trying to do with this deck, which is just stick a threat, have something that they have to deal with, right? The 3/2 Delver will put them on a clock. If you're able to Ninja out, Ninja the Deep Hours, right? That's going to give too much card advantage to you, right? Put something like that out, and then just keep punching them while you leave up, tempo cards like Spellstutter Sprite, which are going to counter what they try to do. You leave up things like Literal Counterspell. You're able to take whatever they play and Vapor Snag it back to their hand. And of course, you want to have the tools to sort of flip your Delver and turn them into that 3/2. So you have the best cantrip in the format, Preordain. A lot of people run 4 Ponders. I'm only running 3. I'm kind of less satisfied with Ponder. I want to bump this down to 2. In fact, if I had access to Days, I'd probably just actually be cutting these as opposed to some of these other cards that I've kind of stuck in here as opposed to Days and Snap and so on and so forth. But yeah, I'm just not super happy with Ponder a lot of the time. I think this is a card mainly for like hitting your land drops. It feels like you don't have a land on turn 2 and you need to Ponder to find one. Anyways, a few minor changes that I've put in here. Spire Golems are pretty standard because they're just a very efficient creature a lot of times because you're running a mana base of all islands. Gush is just great, right? You drawing cards is pretty nice. Bone Splitter is usually a nice card to throw in here as a 1 of. Fairy Miscreant has become the 1-drop of choice for additional fairy to help with Spellstutter Sprite and also something to use with Ninja, right? Because it's a lot of times hard for opponents to block this, on turn 2. And the little bits of tech that I have in here come with the few other cards, which are Gitaxian Probes. I run them as 2 of, 1 Brainstorm, and 1 Disrupt. And I'll, in this short video, try to explain a little bit about that. Gitaxian Probe, I think, is fantastic. There's a lot of stuff that I want to do with this deck that means tapping out and kind of leaving my shields down. And Gitaxian Probe lets me know when it's clear to do that, right? And this is the difference between like the life loss is almost irrelevant to me in a lot of matchups, right? Because even in the mirror matchup, the life loss is pretty irrelevant. It's really more about who's being able to put the clock on the other one. There's really only a few matchups where this life loss is relevant, and the ability to see your opponent's hand and know what your Spellstutter Sprite should be spell stuttering, to know when you should be using your counterspell on this, know whether Vapor Snag is good. Especially in the mirror matchup, this card is so critical. I love it a lot. I run it as a 2 of as a result. I also run 1 Brainstorm. And this is really more in lieu of the Ponder. I'd say the Gitaxian Probes are kind of the replacement for Days. But Brainstorm, I run 1 Brainstorm as opposed to Ponder. 1, because there is some synergy between Brainstorm and Ponder in that I can take cards that I don't want, put them on top of my deck, and then shuffle them away with Ponder. Normally, there aren't a lot of great ways to shuffle away this stuff with Brainstorm. One of the nice things about this is that this really, really helps me set up a Delver of Secrets to flip, which is kind of a big problem, I suppose, with a deck that's sometimes not. It needs to stick a threat, and if the Delver doesn't flip, you can be in trouble. It's instant speed, which means one that I can leave this up if I need to counterspell something, spell starter sprite something. Right. This is one of these things that I can leave up when I can't leave my shields down. This is also something that I can do. I can play a turn 1 Delver, and then I can brainstorm on my upkeep to make sure I flip the Delver turn 1, and that's really big game, I feel. So I run it as a one of. Again, you don't have a way to shuffle your library, so I don't want to get brainstorm locked, but I've had a lot of success with this card, and I think it should be a one of in most Delver lists. I'm also running sort of the last of the interesting tech cards is Disrupt. It's just a blue, counter target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays 1, draw a card. So at minimum, this card cycles itself, and a lot of times it does what I want to do, which is just, even when I'm playing this later on, I'm trading a mana with my opponent. And usually I'm in the position where I've stuck the threat, I'm the guy who they need to come up with answers for my board, and if we can just both tap a mana, right, that's great. And when this counters a spell, it's backbreaking. And I really like this in conjunction with things like Ataxian Probe. A lot of people really do not expect your stuff to be countered when you leave up, just an island. Some people do play around days and things like that, but, the usual counter spell, the one that they're really worried about is Spell Starter Sprite and Counter Spell, right? Those are the 4 ofs in your deck. I like running this as a 1 of. And then a lot of times if I play it game 1, I'll side it out, right? Or I'll also side it out if they don't really have instants or sorceries. But if they do have instants and sorceries or still targets for it, I won't side it out in future games. So it's a nice little trick. I like to get them once, and when you get them, it's usually pretty good. So that's in there. Finally, in the sideboard, there's really, a lot of this is pretty similar to a lot of other stuff you'd see. There's always this question between Steel Sabotage and Annul. The big advantage of Annul, in my opinion, is that it can hit enchantment spells. I feel a little bit weak to Boggles. So I like having the Annul to fight Boggles. I see it frequently enough. I mean, it is one of these tier 2 strategies bumbling about. I play Boggles sometimes myself. Also can deal with some other side things, right? That I might want to deal with, the Journeys to Nowhere, decks with like Tortured Existence. So it does have this greater flexibility over Steel Sabotage, but Steel Sabotage has this really important mode where returning target artifact to its owner's hand hits artifact lands. And because this is a tempo deck, being able to get that extra tempo, just bouncing a land to my opponent's hand, can be so huge. Like if I'm on the play and I'm against an artifact deck and I have Steel Sabotage in hand, it's practically impossible to lose. It almost doesn't matter what the rest of my hand is, right? Because putting them back a land drop is such big game for a deck like this, right? This is a deck that runs 4 main deck Vapor Snag, right? If I could Vapor Snag a land, I would any time. And being able to counter target artifact spell is also pretty useful, right? I'm going up against Affinity. I get to counter their Mirror Enforcer. That's a pretty big game. So that's pretty standard. A lot of the rest of this stuff is pretty standard. People, they run Relic of Progenitus, Stormbound Geist. Dispel is usually in here. Hydroblast in some number. Coral Net. Coral Net is to help you with Stompy. Basically any deck that really has green or white creatures you need to kill. I also run a Curfew. Curfew I find is pretty interesting because bouncing one of my own creatures can be pretty interesting, right? I can actually rebuy something like Spellstarter Sprite. So I can play Curfew, get the Spellstarter Sprite back to my hand, and then replay Spellstarter Sprite, right? As opposed, because I find basically there are enough games where I want to like Vapor Snag my own guy that I figure I might as well run Curfew because it has this very extra bonus against Boggles, right? Where if they only have one Boggle and they suit up their Boggle and I play Curfew, they lose the game. So I like this card as a part of my sideboard against Boggles. And I can sometimes bring it in against other things if just there aren't enough. If I need to cut some other things because I don't have enough relevant stuff for whatever reason, Curfew can come in. Finally, the last thing for the sort of interesting tech is Thornwind Fairies. These fairies have a big downside in the sense that one of the threats that your deck has to face is Scattershot Archer. So the fact that they fly is actually a little bit of a downside. But a lot of decks are running Prodigal Sorcerer. Prodigal Sorcerer in particular, any sort of pinger, is really, really clutch in the mirror matchup, which I'm really concerned about. And if you're not playing against Scattershot Archer, because you're not up against, say, Elves or Stompy, those are usually the two that are going to have a Scattershot Archer, this card is just better, right? It's flying, which means sometimes you're going to use this to get in your Ninja of the Deep Hours. It's a fairy, which means it counts for your spell starter sprite. You don't care that the mana cost is 1 and 2 blue as opposed to 2 and a blue because you don't care. Yeah, I really like this card so far. I really don't see a lot of Stompy and Elves in the meta, and I'm kind of resigned to losing to Elves anyways. It's just a really bad matchup. So if Elves has a Scattershot Archer, I just kind of accept that I'm going to lose the game, right? And it doesn't really matter if this was a Prodigal Sorcerer. Like, they're still going to win, even if this is a Prodigal Sorcerer. So the only matchup where I really care about the difference is Stompy, and everything else, it's charging up my spell starter sprites, and it's giving me extra evasion in case I need a Ninja of the Deep Hours. It's doing a lot for me, and I think this is really, really strong in the mirror, these sort of pinger effects, so I include them in here. Anyways, that's the video. We'll see how it turns out and how everything works with these video settings that I'm tweaking again and again. Yeah, this video is nothing really much to watch. Sorry, it's a pretty standard stock Delver list with just a few tweaks, and even those tweaks would probably go away if I wanted to spend the money on dazes and snaps, but I don't because I'm a cheapskate. So here you go.